Alright everybody, thank you for tuning in to yet another BS Crew video. I really appreciate you being here. Today we're going to be talking about one of my newest obsessions, Marvel Crisis Protocol. Okay, so this isn't going to be like a how to play video or like a getting started video. I might make one of those down the line, but today I'm actually really excited to talk about who I think will, or at least should be, coming next in Marvel Crisis Protocol. Thankfully, I didn't release this video like 2 weeks prior because Mini-Stravaganza that Atomic Mass Games hosted, well, they host it every year, that just came out and they announced a whole ton of new characters through the end of next year as well. But today, these are going to be kind of like my fan predictions, and as a comic fan, you know, basically just who I want to see get in the game, you know, because there's over 170 characters in MCP now, and it's crazy to me that some of these characters haven't been added yet, but you know, we have like 3 Spider-Men and 2 Hulks and a bunch of other duplicates as well. No shade to AMG, but I'm really excited to see the variety that can come forward in the next couple of years of MCP. So let's get into it. Number 1, the biggest pick on this entire list, and it's the most highly requested, so I'm getting it out of the way now. Fantastic Four and Doctor Doom. I'm not too sure why this hasn't happened yet. I'm assuming there's some kind of race issues, but I'm really hoping by the time the Fantastic Four movie comes out next year, we could have some Fantastic Four MCP minis come out. Because personally, I would love to paint them, and also I think playing as them would be really cool. I could see them coming out with like a Future Foundation affiliation where you could do any of like the previous Fantastic Four members, right? So you can get She-Hulk, Spider-Man, maybe if they stretch it out, you can get like Ghost Rider and Wolverine in there. It'd be great. You know, they're Marvel's first family, and I'm shocked that they haven't been in yet because, you know, you have these other corners of the universe like, you know, the Avengers, the Web Warriors, X-Men, even like all these villains. You know, there's so many characters in the game already, but for whatever reason, the Fantastic Four and Doctor Doom, who is like the most iconic villain in all of Marvel, isn't in the game yet. So I think that's number 1. It's the biggest request that pretty much everybody has. If you go on the MCP subreddit, you will see that conversation happen like daily. So, on to the next pick. Okay, so my next pick is going to be a little bit different. I only have 1 character and then actually 1 idea for like an ultimate encounter that I think would be really cool. So for the character itself, also tying into the Fantastic Four, sorry, I gotta do it. I could see the Silver Surfer being a really cool, very high threat level character. Just zipping around the map with like a long movement in a big base and probably hitting like a truck too. You know, I could see the Silver Surfer pretty easily being at least like a 7 cost threat. I know that those have a history of this point of being some of the most busted characters in the game at release. I'm looking at Malekith there. I didn't play the game at that point, but I've heard about it. I've heard the horror stories. So I think, assuming they could balance Silver Surfer really well, I think they would be a great addition to the game. And again, it would be the super heavy hitter, and it would just kind of wreck house the entire game. And I'd be really excited to see, you know, what they could come up with for that. Because I think when we're talking about Fantastic Four villains, you know, if we're excluding the smaller ones, like, I say smaller, but you know, if we're excluding the villains like Mole Man, right, which would be cool, but you know, I think like Doom, Silver Surfer, and then Galactus are probably the biggest 3. So Silver Surfer is obviously the herald of Galactus, so I think it'd be really interesting to see if we can get an ultimate Galactus encounter, right? Obviously, you couldn't actually play Galactus. That would be insane. I don't even know how you would incorporate that into the game, normally at least. I think that it would be really cool to have an ultimate encounter in which you need to team up with someone to basically build the ultimate nullifier. I think that'd be a really awesome way of kind of like a race against the clock kind of ultimate encounter, because in the comics, Reed Richards basically, in order to get Galactus to stand down one time, it's very iconic, he builds this thing called the ultimate nullifier, which will basically blow out all of existence, right? So he tells Galactus, you know, if you try to swallow Earth, we're taking you and everything else in existence down with us. And I think it was a really interesting gambit, and it was this super high stakes story in the comics, and I think it would be really cool to kind of relive that on the tabletop. Okay, this will be the last Fantastic Four adjacent thing I bring up, okay? One thing that I think would also be really cool, and again, still Fantastic Four adjacent, I could see this one being a character pack, maybe a 2-pack, but it'll probably get split up into 3 because I think the models will be kind of big, or into 2 rather, because I think the models would be kind of big. I think the Super Skrull would be a really cool addition. If you're unaware of the Super Skrull, the very brief history is basically it is a Skrull, right? Which, if you already play MCP or if you watch the MCU movies, you already know what a Skrull is. They're shape-shifting aliens. But long story short, he essentially gets the powers of the Fantastic Four, and he becomes basically the strongest Skrull. And sometimes he's more of an anti-hero, sometimes he's a straight up villain, especially when he was first created. So I think that would just be an awesome character, and I think it'd be interesting to kind of have like, you know, like a shifting ability, you know, like going into a turn, you need to choose, oh, I want him to use like the Thing superpower. I want him this turn to use the Human Torch's superpower. So I think it'd be really interesting as kind of like, it could be a very flexible character. I think that'd be sick. And also in this pack with Super Skrull and or separately, but this is still only number 3 on this list, I think having the Maker would be incredible. The Maker is one of the more recent, but also one of the coolest villains in the Marvel Universe right now. If you're unfamiliar with the Maker, it's basically an alternate version of Reed Richards that more or less goes bad when the Ultimate Universe starts to fall apart. So instead of this, like the 616, our basic Reed Richards, who has pretty much always been able to successfully do it because he's clever and, you know, he has like this love for his family that kind of pulls him through with everything. We have a Reed Richards that was essentially dumped by Sue Storm, right? And she ends up going out with the Thing, and a lot of other stuff happens. A lot of people die over the course of Ultimate Fantastic Four, and it kind of sends Reed Richards down this dark path. And now the Maker, which is who this Reed Richards becomes, is actually the main villain of the new Ultimate Universe, and that story is still unfolding. It'll probably keep unfolding for at least another year until we get some solid answers. But yeah, if you haven't read the comics, I really can't help but sell. The Maker is one of the coolest villains in comics right now, so just do yourself a favor. A, if a Maker model comes out, I'd be very happy. But also B, do yourself a favor and pick up any of the new Ultimate Universe stuff. I'll be talking about some more of those later in this video as well, but they're just so cool. I love the Maker, and I don't know where he stands right now actually with this, but he actually had a symbiote at one point as well in the Donny Cates Venom run, so I'd be interested to see if that could play into it. But basically, he has all the powers of Mr. Fantastic, but he's a bad guy, and he's also wicked intelligent. Okay, so this will probably be the quickest recommendation, or suggestion I should say, on this list. I think having Alpha Flight would be really cool. I'm not sure if they would need like an entire affiliation, but I could see one of the affiliation packs of 4 characters getting added into the game. Because Alpha Flight is essentially Canada's answer to the X-Men / Avengers, depending on which kind of story you're talking about. I'm personally not super familiar with them. I haven't read like their original issues or anything like that, but I mostly know them from the Immortal Hulk storyline, where Carol Danvers, Captain Marvel, basically takes over Alpha Flight, and that takes place after the Ultimates, which I'll be talking about here in just a moment as well. But yeah, for Alpha Flight, I could see Puck, Sasquatch, Guardian, and Snowbird all getting added into the affiliation pack. When you're talking about Alpha Flight, it's kind of weird to call them iconic, because they're not really, you really only know them if you're a diehard comic book fan, but those are kind of like the 4 staples, and then they'll occasionally have some like swapped out characters in there as well. They're really cool. Puck especially, even though I've only read a handful of comic book issues with him in it, I really like him as a character, and I think the rest would be really cool padding. And you know, like the thing with a lot of these MCP releases is that they're always going to make somebody happy. You know, I know most people couldn't care less about the Man-Thing or Elsa Bloodstone announcements, but I love it. I love the supernatural side of Marvel, so like I'm going crazy for it. So I'm sure that like if Alpha Flight was to get announced, it would make somebody happy. All right, let's talk about the Ultimates, shall we? Not those Ultimates, we're talking about the good Ultimates, okay? So the Ultimates that I'm referring to are the ones written by Al Ewing, and they're incredible. So they're in the main 616 universe in Marvel Comics, completely unrelated to the original Ultimates from the original Ultimate Universe. But these Ultimates are basically people that are trying to pretty much solve all these huge galactic problems before they actually occur. So this team consists of Captain Marvel, Photon, they already have models, and then there's also Black Panther, him as well, already has multiple models. And there's 2 main characters that I feel like are missing. So America Chavez, if you've watched Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness, she is one of the main characters in there. In the comics, she has a pretty similar power set where she could like teleport people, and is just overall, you know, she has like super strength. I could see her being a really cool character, being able to just kind of like throw / teleport people like all across the map. That would be a really cool character trait. And lastly, we also have Blue Marvel, who's basically the main character of the Ultimates book. And he is just such a cool character. I didn't know too much about him until I actually read the Ultimates. But yeah, I think I just kind of fell in love with this character. He's so cool. He does have a pretty similar power set to the other kind of like really highly powered people in this group. So like Photon and Captain Marvel, you know, he shoots a lot of energy blasts and that kind of stuff, except he has antimatter for his power. So I think it'd be really cool to see kind of like damage as people kind of like get close to, like extra damage as people like get close to him, or like maybe like end their move in front of him. I might be too like Warhammer brained for that to make sense in MCP, but I think that would be a really cool addition to the roster. Okay, now for the affiliation that I am currently playing, and the one that really caught my eye when I first started, I think we need 2 more defenders added in, okay? My love for Marvel basically stems from a lot of the street level characters, right? That's why like the biggest video on this channel is So You Want to Read Spider-Man. I love Spider-Man. Now when he's always doing like the Spider-Verse stuff, even though that stuff is cool, I really like it when it's, you know, these crime stories, you know, and he's just a guy, you know, he has superpowers, but he's trying to juggle these everyday responsibilities, right? So we have plenty of people like that, like Daredevil and Moon Knight. I've also made videos about them. But kind of the 2 big omissions I feel like from the Defenders lineup right now are Jessica Jones, you know, and if we're talking the TV show version of the Defenders, we already have 3 of the 4. We're just missing Jessica Jones, so I think she would be a really cool addition. She would probably only be like a 3 threat. She's not like all that powerful, you know, in comparison to a lot of the other characters in this game, but I think she would just kind of feel like a missing spot on the roster. I also think that it would be really cool to have White Tiger. I believe it's Ava Ayala. I might be mispronouncing that name, but the female White Tiger. I think she'd be really cool. Same thing. They're just kind of street level characters. I'm not really sure how they would perform in game. Probably similar to like Iron Fist and Luke Cage. But I think it's always going to be cool to get more of these street level, a little bit more obscure characters in there as well. And it's kind of like a bonus one at the end of this. I also think having Zebediah Killgrave, the Purple Man, I think he could be a really interesting character where, you know, instead of like throwing characters, you could have him almost like rob activations, maybe if he gets like one of like the triple triggers where you can need like a hit, crit, and a wild, you know, that might be broken. I'm not like, I haven't workshopped this, you know, I haven't play tested any of these ideas, but I think it would be interesting if for like one activation, he could like move like an opponent's character or something like that, because this whole thing is brainwashing people, because he has essentially pheromones around him that, you know, he could say anything from jump off a bridge to get me a coffee and people will do it, right? And he's one of the most powerful. He's not even really a telepath, but he's one of the most like dangerous people in the Marvel universe, because he's also a complete psychopath. So I'm not sure if he would be like Criminal Syndicate or Cabal, probably Criminal Syndicate if I had to guess, but I could see him also being a great addition to the team. Okay, now I do fully believe that the X-Men are pretty well handled in MCP. There's really only a couple of missions that I think could really kind of liven up the roster, and there's some fan favorites as well as one other villain that I'm kind of surprised hasn't been added to the Sentinels, you know, like their whole thing yet. So I think Jubilee is probably the single biggest omission from MCP so far. Again, she's not the most powerful mutant, but just on vibes alone, I think she would get a lot of people to pick her up. You know, just the whole like 90s aesthetic with like the bright yellow jacket, the pink shirt, and just having the fireworks come out of her fingers, and she has cool sunglasses. I think she would just be a really cool character to have in the game. And also, I would just love to paint up Jubilee. I think that'd be sick. And paired with Jubilee, I could see Dazzler coming in, right? Basically this like pop star mutant, actually a pretty similar power set to Jubilee, not as powerful, but she's cool. And I think it would be really cool just to have like those two paired together. And then one of the X-Men villains that I think hasn't been added yet that I think would be awesome would be Nimrod, right? Basically like the most powerful Sentinel, more or less, right? And just having him just wreck shop. I think with a lot of the Fall of X stuff that's been happening in Marvel Comics, I think it's high time that Nimrod gets his own figure and rules, because that would be awesome. I also really like, especially when I was a teenager, I really got into the Young Avengers, and when I was a teenager, Champions by Mark Waid was coming out, so I really like the Champion series, right? So we have Kid Nova, Viv Vision, Miles Morales, the totally, what's he called? It's the all new, all different Hulk, but I don't, the totally cool Hulk or something like that. But it was the Teenage Hulk, which was cool. That whole series I thought was great. It's like Miss Marvel was in there as well. But yeah, I think that there are two characters from the Champions that would be really cool. I think having like a Young Avengers style affiliation, maybe have like Kate Bishop be like a leader, or Miles be a leader, or Miss Marvel be a leader. I think it'd be cool that if they can kind of like combine the Young Avengers and the Champions. So I think having Viv Vision would be really cool. Probably play pretty similar to normal Vision, but would probably focus a bit more on speed speed, if I had to guess. I could see that being a way that they kind of differentiate, where she wouldn't hit as hard, but she could just move really fast and phase through a bunch of objects. And also Ironheart. I'm kind of shocked that she's not in the game yet either. Basically Tony Stark's protege, well, at least now, they didn't start that way. But now Riri Williams, especially now that she is in the second Black Panther movie, I could see her getting added into the game pretty soon, hopefully. Basically, Riri has her own version of the Iron Man armor, except she kind of built it from herself. She had an AI of a dead Tony Stark. It's a whole thing. Help her out with it. But yeah, no, I mean, both of these characters are really cool, but I'm probably more excited to see Riri, if I had to guess, just because, again, most of the corners in MCP of the Marvel Universe are pretty well filled out, but I do think that we can get the younger end of the universe in here as well. Okay, so we're gonna round up with a couple more guesses here. I think having Red Goblin would be a really cool addition to the symbiote roster that we have, which I think Red Goblin should also be a part of a new symbiote affiliation. I think it's high time. There's a bunch of them at this point. You know, we have Gwenom, for God's sakes. Like, there's enough symbiote adjacent characters in the game now. Red Goblin, if you're unaware of, you probably already do know it. Basically, it is when Norman Osborn, the Green Goblin, gets infected by the Carnage symbiote, so he turns into the Red Goblin. I wasn't too crazy about that whole run on Spider-Man when that happened, but there's some really cool moments in that story, including a lot of stuff with Agent Venom as well. So I think it would be really cool to kind of have like the more like evil end of the symbiotes as well as the more hero end of it with, like, you know, Gwenom and Agent Venom. But yeah, I think that Red Goblin would be a really cool, honestly, just like a solo character pack. I think Green Goblin is a solo character pack now, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, I could totally see that happening, and I think it'd be really cool. All right, and one more symbiote affiliated thing. We have a lot of very powerful characters already in the game. You know, we have Malekith, we have Thanos, Phoenix just got announced, so I don't think it's a far cry to say that I think Null the Symbiote God would be an awesome addition to this. Again, I think this would happen with the whole symbiote affiliation if they ever decide to actually come out with one. I could also see this being a full Ultimate Encounter, if I'm being honest with you. Because Null in the comics, he's the symbiote god, right? So we find out that the symbiotes are basically a hive mind, and Null comes to Earth and basically tries to claim it. And Donny Cates' Venom run is incredible, so I don't want to spoil too much here, but so I would just highly recommend picking that up because it's awesome. It made me, like, I always liked Venom, don't get me wrong, but like, that made me love Venom. It's such a good story. And yeah, I think just having Null the Symbiote God would be just a bruiser of a character. And I think that he could do a lot of really cool things too if they wind up doing a symbiote affiliation, because that way, you know, he can maybe, like, you know, the lore reason why all the symbiotes would be working with the symbiote god would just be that, you know, it's part of the hive mind, they're getting controlled or something, you know? So yeah, I think having Null be in there, I just think his model would also be crazy. So, and then maybe he could also have some minions as well with just like the little like symbiote bats and stuff like that. Yeah, I just think it'd be awesome. Give me Null. Okay, so we only got a couple more things here. These are kind of bonuses. I initially made this list with only 10 characters in mind, and now there's like probably 20 I mentioned in this video. I think having some of the new Ultimate Universe stuff would be really cool. So, like I mentioned earlier, there is a few new Ultimate comics in the brand new Ultimate Universe that the maker helped shape, right? So there's the new Team of the Ultimates, which is really cool. There's the brand new Ultimate X-Men, which is completely different from everything that I've seen before. Ultimate Black Panther, and then of course Ultimate Spider-Man. All of these are fantastic, but specifically, I think there's a lot of cool new takes on characters that I never even considered before. So I think having some of the Ultimate X-Men like May Storm or Armor would be really cool, and especially in Armor's perspective, I think it'd be really interesting to have almost like one of those two mini kits, but they're the same character. You know, so you could have, you know, the base character, and then you could have the actual armor form around her, you know, maybe when she gets flipped, or maybe she needs to like activate the armor by doing something. I don't know. Again, I haven't play tested this, but like, I think that stuff would be pretty cool. One other thing, I could see the new Iron Lad being a thing. It's basically a younger version of Tony Stark. His dad basically built the initial Iron Man suit, and then he kind of took over, and now he's leading this like revolutionary charge against government and basically this cabal that controls the entire world. It's a really cool comic. I love it. Okay, in this last thing, this is not gonna happen ever. I have zero hopes for this happening, but it would be cool. Obviously, AMG is very determined on consistently bringing out brand new characters, right? Just because there's a few repeats, and you know, some people get upset by that, but they're constantly determined to bring out brand new characters. So I have no faith that this is ever going to happen, but I do think it would be cool. I think it'd be really cool just to get different alternate sculpts of characters. They could still use the original rules, right? But I would think that it'd be really awesome to see completely different costumes for some of these characters, right? You know, in some of my MCP figures, I do paint them like a different scheme, or you know, I like take inspiration from another scheme from the comics or something. But like, imagine having like a Hellfire Gala X-Men team. That would be incredible. The Hellfire Gala is basically this one time a year where there's this giant ceremony on Krakoa where all the X-Men, well, not all the, well, yeah, it's all the X-Men, and pretty much every mutant from everywhere is invited to Krakoa, the island where the X-Men lived. And, you know, and this is where they announce like the next X-Men team, basically. And they're always dressed to the nines. It's basically, whoever does the art for these, I believe it changes every year. Like, I think they just want to do like a fashion magazine with like comic book heroes, because that's what it comes across as. And like, all the X-Men are basically just iced out the entire time. This also spans to other portions of the Marvel universe as well. So like, the Spider-Men show up for it, and like, they have some really cool costumes as well. So I think it'd be really cool to get some alternate costumes in MCP. Again, I don't think it's going to happen because it would require much more time than I'm making it sound like right now. But if I did need to pick a couple, I do think having Mr. Knight, you know, Moon Knight's alternate persona, right? Specifically, if it was inspired from the look from the Declan Shalvey run, I think that'd be really cool in all of his art. That would be awesome. I also think having Last Stand Spider-Man would be incredible. So the old man Peter Parker from ASM, I think it's 500. It's the Happy Birthday issue. I think it's 500. I don't know. And even like Miles Morales, on the topic of Spider-Man, he had a costume that he was rocking with for quite a while in the comics now as well. Definitely like a completely different look. It's not just like a palette swap or anything like that. Yeah, I think it'd be cool to see either of those outfits in MCP as well. Lastly, again, this is tying into the MCU stuff, and I have a lot of opinions on this as well. I might be making an entire video about this. I haven't thought about it. Well, I haven't thought about making a video about this. This has consumed my mind. Everybody knows now that Robert Downey Jr. was just cast as Dr. Doom in the MCU. He's not Tony Stark as Dr. Doom. They said Vincent Von Doom. I don't feel great about that, but that's neither here nor there. To tie into the MCU, I think it'd be cool if they took inspiration from the time when Tony Stark was dead in the comics and Dr. Doom, Vincent Von Doom, actually took up the mantle of Iron Man and tried to go on like a path of redemption. I think that would be so cool. So the infamous Iron Man, it's basically a mix of Dr. Doom's armor, but it's also kind of stylized like an actual like Iron Man mark armor. And yeah, it looks awesome. You'll see the pictures up on screen now. And yeah, I just think that would be like such a cool model. It's basically Iron Man with a cloak, right? With like the silver and green palette. But yeah, that's kind of all I'm thinking of right now for like alternate costumes. I don't think it'll ever really happen, but it'd be neat. All right, everybody, thank you again for tuning into yet another BS Crew video. And once again, special thank you to Josh from RSMP Tabletop. Thank you for letting me borrow your gear. Means the world to me, man. And yeah, everybody, thank you so much for tuning in. There's going to be plenty of more videos coming out soon. You've been wonderful. I've been Jared. See you guys next time.